Dr. Miles Pattenden is a papal expert and historian. He joins us now from Oxford in the UK. Good morning to you, Dr. Pattenden, and it's good to have you back on the program.
Good morning, Bridget.
Well, a very sombre and sad day for Catholics around the world. How is Pope Francis being remembered?
I think Pope Francis will be remembered as a man of great charisma and courage and humility, who also had left an indelible mark on the papacy, that in many ways his pontificate will be one of the most significant of the last 100 or 200 years, partly simply for the change of tone and focus and emphasis which he pushed on the way the papacy works and the objectives that Catholics should have. In a sense, the big thing that he did was to say to a lot of Catholics in Australia and around the Western world, look, forget about all these arguments you keep having about yourselves and things like sexuality and liturgy. That's all a bit navel-gazing. We're all sinners. You need to forget that. But what you need to do is to focus on the poor and the weak and the disenfranchised and the vulnerable around the world. And he focused the church's attention very much on the global south. And partly for that, he was able, in a way, to rehabilitate its reputation everywhere. And he showed a kind of leadership which inspired a lot of people throughout the world.
He was also known for his passion in reforming the church as well. What sort of a position did he find the global church in when he came to the pontiff, to the position in 2013?
Well, I think Francis found the global church divided and fractured on all kinds of issues. It's not clear that he really solved any of those issues, but he had a strategy for dealing with them, which was perhaps overall quite effective. He said, well, look, there are these issues that divide us, but we've got to keep talking. And it's by talking we might generate consensus about them. That was very much his strategy. But also, they're not what really matters, is what he said. Who am I to judge about gay people? Not important. What we need to do is to focus on poverty, on climate change, on things that, are really existential and fundamental to what it is to being a Christian. And in a sense that the fact that he was so successful at putting that message across to over 1 billion people around the world, that's his legacy. And that's why he'll be remembered for so long and so fondly by people.
He also had a focus on different parts of the world, didn't he? He was interested in the global south and visited here quite often as well.
Yes, he had a special passion for poor people wherever they could be found. And one of the policies which he was able to enact was this idea that the College of Cardinals and indeed the central administration of the church should be much more representative, not simply of the number of Catholics and the wealth of Catholics, but it should include representatives from every Catholic community. That's why he created cardinals from such unusual places as Algeria and Iran and Mongolia. He said that, all of these Catholic communities, however small they are, they matter and they need to be represented in Rome. So that was the kind of guiding principle behind a lot of his administrative reforms. Of course, there were costs to that, which included the fact that it meant that there were fewer cardinals with experience running large metropolitan archdioceses such as Sydney or Melbourne. And of course, those are the people that generally held the central officials of the papal courier into account. So there were plenty of critics like the late Cardinal George Pell, who said, well, actually, this is a really bad strategy because it means the governance of the church is not as effective as it could be.
And Miles, talk us through now the steps towards the conclave, which will happen, we understand, between 15 and 20 days after the seat has been vacated.
Yes, there's a pretty strict timetable for what happens next, with just that little bit of flexibility, as you've hinted, for how the cardinals schedule things precisely. But we should expect the Pope to be laid out in state for the faithful to pass by him and pay their respects to him on Wednesday. That'll probably last for 3 days. I would expect the Pope's funeral to take place sometime around Saturday, but again, that nothing has been confirmed. And then there'll be what's called the Novendiales, the 9 days of mourning, which are an essential period for the cardinals themselves to gather in Rome and to start discussing how they should be voting in the election. Because one thing which has particularly changed in the 21st century is that the eyes of the world will be on Rome in this moment. The cardinals know that. They know they can't afford to take months or even years to elect a new pope, as sometimes happened in past centuries. So they'll want to give themselves the best chance to effect a speedy election when that conclave begins. And that means they need to gather earlier and initiate very substantial discussions during the 2 weeks that are forthcoming before that starts.